Well, look, I mean, as I said in my speech, on treaty issues, we've got lots of different perspectives and there's lots of different views. That has been the history for 185 years. It'll continue to be the future debate and discussion as well. And so I appreciate there are differences. But I think what is unique is, in New Zealand is that we can have these events like Rātana, Waitangi and others where we actually do come together. And, it is really special. And I think, you just got to get out and about in the world and actually see how often social cohesion and relationships happen in other countries, and this is pretty special to be here today.
Do you regret the way the treaty principles bill is played out?
Well, look, I think I've been very clear. We're not supporting it. We'll vote it down. It won't become law. But again, as part of a coalition agreement in a modern, mature MMP environment, that is the reality of negotiations and forming coalition governments. It'll be the same for any future coalition government that's formed. Parties come to the Parliament now with very distinct positions and different constituency and different policies, and our job under the MMP system is to try and make it work, and that's what we're doing. And so we're united on the big stuff. Yes, we have a big difference with ACT over the Treaty Principles Bill, but our position's clear. We've been clear about that from day one.
At all having to come to these events over and over and have to explain yourself?
Oh no, I get energised by these events.
Well, no, fatigue having to talk about the Treaty Principles Bill and your position.
Well, look, I mean, I meet with iwi leaders as I did before Christmas in my own office in Parliament. I meet with them regularly throughout the country, and I appreciate it's been a challenging time and a challenging 12 months with the Treaty Principles Bill. But we also had some pretty awesome conversations about other things that we can do together, and actually that's this bill will go down. We'll move on. But importantly, there's been a lot of good work, starting work, even just in the last 12 months. And I tried to touch on that briefly to say, we work with Māori health organisations those first few weeks of coming to power, put a $50 million investment in, and I think we've done 69,000 immunisations of New Zealanders. You look at the money that Tama's put into housing providers, $82 million. Look at the work that Tama's delivered around getting Māori kids out of motels and into proper homes and setting them up for a much more stable life and attending school and all that good stuff. We talked about emergency housing for the better part of a decade, and actually our government in a very short period of time has actually delivered on that. And
to what extent do you agree just on what I think it was Rahui who said that the state of the Māori nation is at its highest ever been still, or something to that effect? To what extent do you agree with him?
Well, look, I mean, Rahui and I met with a number of other iwi leaders before Christmas in my office, as I said, in that last week, and we have a very constructive relationship, very good conversations, and and I get the angst and the anxiety that Treaty Principles Bill has caused, but I also feel pretty inspired that actually when you think about our government, which is about outcomes and getting things done, when you think about our desire for localism and devolution and the link to mana motahake, actually there's very good alignment on the values between the National Party and certainly iwi leaders and iwi up and down the country. And so we've had conversations about how we do more together around building great infrastructure in this country. We've talked a lot about how we can really accelerate social housing in particular. We think that's a big cornerstone for what we need to deliver to progress Māori outcomes. We've talked about what we can do in the areas of health and education. We'll continue to do that.
Do you think that New Zealanders believe that the Treaty Principles Bill will be voted down? Because you've repeatedly said that, and there still remains to be a huge amount of angst about it, as you say.
Look, we're going through a process. The select committee process will wrap up at the end of February. It'll come back into the Parliament for a second reading. It'll get voted down. It'll get knocked on the head, and we will move forward.
Just on that, the Greens say you can spike it now that it's sort of technically got to select committee. Would National consider?
Look, we want to run a process. That was our commitment, that we'd take it to first reading and select committee. As I've said from day one, we do not support it beyond that. We never have, never will, and as a result, it won't become law.
When it does come to its natural end, how will you as national leader and the party go about undoing some of the damage that's been done?
Well, that's what I'm alluding to. Is over the course of the last year, we've continued to meet as a senior ministerial team, myself individually and with my team as Prime Minister, with senior iwi leaders, and we've had very constructive dialogue about the things that we want to work on together. It was really interesting. This morning I went up onto the cemetery to see some elevation about what's happening here in the settlement, and you realise the principle of how do you create a bigger economic engine so that those funds and that money can actually power up and deliver better public services, exactly what I was alluding to yesterday. And so there's huge alignment from Māori around actually going for growth, saying yes to things, not no to things, as I talked through yesterday. And so I'm very confident we can do a lot together.
So your plan to undo some of the damage to Māori relations is to talk with Māori about the economy?
Well, we've been talking to Māori about a range of issues. It starts with the economy in terms of actually how do they participate in the economy and create more opportunity for their own people. It starts with them talking about what we're doing on social housing. We've got some great models emerging around business, iwi and government working together. If you think about some of the social housing projects that Tama has recently announced and we've been working with, the projects that I've visited in the Tairāwhiti and other parts of the country. We've got a big opportunity around education to make sure we improve educational outcomes. So those are the things that really matter, because in 20 years' time we can't be having the same conversation. We need growth, we need Māori to do well, we need all of New Zealand to do well. Treaty settlements. Yeah, we've advanced 8 treaty settlements in the course of the last 12 months. We obviously have, as I said, the Taranaki Maunga settlement coming to Parliament next week, which will be a big deal and a major milestone. But I think there's a lot more that we need to step that up. And the reason's very simple, is that when iwi actually have got through a treaty settlement process, it actually sets them up for actually future prosperity, and that's important. And when you've got prosperity, and when you've got a bigger economic engine, that actually means that you can support your people in a much better way.
Is there any world where you will sell off more state assets?
Well, look, I mean, I'm open to the conversation, but as I said at the beginning of coming to government, it's not something on our agenda right now. What is on our agenda is actually how we accelerate economic growth, but it's something that I'm open to discussing further in the longer term.
State houses. David Seymour says he's currently negotiating to sell off state houses in the budget. Is that going to happen?
As I said, we've said we won't be selling state assets. What we're doing, wholesale sale of state assets. What we're focused on is making sure we actually grow the economy, and for us, and Nicola being minted as our newly appointed Minister for Economic Growth, she's very fixated on driving our economic growth plan.
Do you think that David Seymour should have been here today rather than delivering his
Look, there are decisions for him, and ultimately that's up to him to decide whether he does or doesn't want to be here. I've always come. I always find it a really special event, I think, and I think other political leaders are the same.
It does leave questions about the treaty principles up to you rather than him, though. And concern was raised about it last year, it was raised this year. How concerned are you about it leading into political capital having
Look, I mean, as I've said before, there's no doubt about it, it's caused anxiety on all sides of the debate. We are where we are because of, I think, the previous government not making the case for the changes that it was driving through that period of time, and creating that division. But as I've said consistently, you don't rewrite the treaty with a simple stroke of a pen. We work. Yeah, sure, but the reality is it will pass. We've got one more month of submissions, and then the bill will be killed.
Seymour comes back after the next election and says he'll only support the if he gets a public referendum. Will you refuse?
Yes, I would. It's a no for me.
Just back on the previous question, are you confident that you can repair that division and repair that relationship with Māori and the Crown going forward?
Yeah, look, I mean, in the conversations with iwi leaders that I had before I came to politics, when I was in opposition and now as Prime Minister, there is real common ground, as I said, in the values of the National Party, which is we don't believe in centralisation and massive control from Wellington. We want to empower the communities to actually get the work done themselves. And our best examples, as you've seen under National with the Māori Party and Whānau Ora and the work of Dame Tariana Turia, has been actually that work of social investment being delivered through the communities. We want to move money, Nicola and I, out of the centre of Wellington and out to the communities where the work gets done. And we want to see improved results when we do that. A small example is it's been a good investment working with Māori health organisations almost 13 months ago to really drive immunisation rates. We've got a lot more to do, but it's a good example of how we can work together really well.
So you're confident that as those policies kind of play out, that relationship will re-strengthen?
Yeah, look, I think there's a real alignment of values, and I just put it to you, I think Māori have done really well under National-led governments, Who did the most treaty settlements? National. Who set up, Whānau Ora? National. And so I think there's really good working relationships and trust that is there, and it will continue to be there. I know it's been a challenging and a tough time with respect to the Treaty Principles Bill, but we will deal with that. That issue will be resolved. But really it's the work that we want to focus on, which is we came to government to get things done for New Zealanders, and whether that's Māori or non-Māori. It turns out Māori want higher incomes, Māori want better houses, Māori want better education. They also want to feel safer in their homes, and they want to have better access to healthcare. So those are the things that we can work together on and we are with different iwi top-to-top meetings that we have, as well as obviously other meetings that I have throughout the course of the week.
You spoke a lot about frank discussions and the importance of that. Can you give us one example of something, a policy or a decision that you have changed based on feedback that you've had from Te Iwi Māori?
Well, look, I mean, a lot of conversations we're having is around how do you actually even get iwi to partner with, say, pools of foreign capital and investment capital to work together on actually getting things built for Māori and for iwi. Those conversations, when I had even before Christmas with a subset of the iwi leaders, they have huge commercial organisations, they have massive amounts of commercial literacy, they're some of our best organisations in the country, and they want to be able to participate in that investment as it comes into this country. And so we're going to make sure that we accommodate for that, because I think some of our best, most successful JVs have actually been between iwi and foreign capital, and that will continue.
So you've adjusted your policy based on those discussions?
Well, I'm just saying to you, it's a classic case where conversation leads to a discussion of opportunity. And the bottom line is this: if you need to form relationships, because then you start to talk about the possibilities of what you can do together by virtue of getting to know each other at a relational level, and then you put the plans together and then you get the better results, and that's what we're trying to do.
On emergency housing, celebrating a 75% decrease, I think, in emergency housing, but where have those people gone? Labor's worried they're homeless.
I think we've been very clear and explicit about where most of the whānau who have left emergency have gone to. When we arrived, we knew where about 50% have gone to. Now we know where about 80% have gone to, and for the most part, all those 80% have gone to either transitional social homes or private housing. We know that, and we can track that, and that's a lot better than 50%, which we knew 13 months ago.
And can I just say, there is a classic case, emergency housing. We have talked about the blight of motel accommodation and raising kids in motel rooms now for the better part of a decade. And by virtue of having a government focused on management and execution and doing the basics well, we've actually been able to move almost 2,000 kids out of living in life in a motel into a proper home. And the reality is, I think that's something that should be really celebrated. And that's an example of what I'm talking about. And many of those kids were Māori kids. And so the work of Tama coming together on April the 1st, working with Chris Bishop, finding a process by which we can actually work our way through. We had almost 4,000 families, I think, living in motels. They were supposed to be short-term accommodation. You end up living there for a year, raising your kids there. That's unacceptable. All New Zealanders felt bad about that, yet we've delivered on that, and I look forward to you guys reporting about it.
Were you worried about job seeker numbers going up?
No, to be expected, but as Nicola and I have been talking about, the reality is when you spend more, you drive inflation up, you drive interest rates, the economy goes into recession, and the lag effect is that people start laying off workers, and that's the experience we've been in the last 6 months in particular. Our focus, as you heard yesterday, is to go for growth, and I'll let Nicola say a few things on that.
Look, it is tough when people are losing their jobs, and that is one of the aspects of our damaged economy that worries me the most, is growing unemployment. So we want to see more people able to get into work. That's partly why Louise Upston's doing such effective reforms in the welfare area to make sure there are good incentives to go into work. But look, that's why growth matters. Because when small businesses are growing, that's when they hire more people, that's where they invest more, and that's why we're so focused on driving growth this year. That's the way we'll get better jobs for Kiwis.
Can you confirm that you'll be at Oneki Marae and Akarua for Waitangi Day?
Look, we will confirm closer to the time. There's good reasons for why we don't do that until closer to the moment. But, again, as I've said before, and other Prime Ministers have done before as well, I've always wanted to get out and about across the country and actually go to the places where the treaty was signed. I think that actually helps build it as a bigger event throughout the whole of the country. And I've had a number of very kind iwi who have very generously offered to host us, and so we will confirm that shortly, but close to the time. Cool.
In your State of the Nation speech, there was a little detail about Māori policies. So what Māori policies are most important to you and your government?
Well, I just disagree completely, because I just say to you, Māori want higher incomes, Māori want better housing, they want better social outcomes, they want to feel safer in their homes and their communities as well. And what we have to do in this country, after 30 years where everyone's working incredibly hard, we want to lift our collective living standards, and the way that we do that is a ruthless focus on economic growth. There is huge opportunity in my conversations with iwi leaders about how they participate in investment and actually how we work together to drive better economic outcomes for Māori. So I just say, a government that is ruthlessly focused on improving the economic and enlarging the economic engine for all New Zealanders, Māori or not, is actually a really good thing, and that's the job of the coming 12 months for sure.